Okay, let's dive right into this. We are currently living in the middle of a massive, silent crisis. You aren't going to see it on the evening news, but I guarantee you feel it every single day. It's our rapidly diminishing attention span. Today's explainer unpacks exactly what is happening to our brains, and we're drawing directly from Johann Hari's incredible book, Stolen Focus. We're going to look at exactly why you can't seem to concentrate anymore, and much more importantly, how we can actually fix it.
But first, stop for just a second and think back to earlier today. Think about that moment when you were blazing through a huge backlog of emails, catching up on 5 different group chats and just infinitely scrolling your feeds. When you finally put the phone down, did you actually feel calm and present? Were you energized to do some deep, meaningful work? Well, if you're anything like me, the answer is a resounding no. You probably felt completely exhausted, scattered, and just overwhelmed.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because understanding this requires a clear roadmap. For today's explainer, we're covering the 3 forms of focus, the great acceleration, the gradual deprivation, and then we'll get into the solutions with reclaiming morning focus and pre-commitments for sleep.
All right, part 1. The 3 forms of focus. Knowing what is at stake.
And honestly, the stakes are absolutely incredibly high here. Having deep focus is what allows us to complete rewarding projects and actually build something meaningful. Without it, we just settle for shallow work. To borrow an idea from the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, human beings desperately need to strive for a worthwhile goal. Without that internal focus, we're basically just wandering through life.
Hari breaks this down into 3 really distinct categories. First, you've got spotlight focus. That's concentrating on a single, immediate task. Second is starlight. That's seeing your North Star, your long-term goals. And finally, daylight, which is the daily self-awareness to know exactly which goals you should even be pursuing. The terrifying reality we're facing is that all 3 of these essential cognitive functions are getting dimmer by the day.
Which brings us to part 2, the great acceleration. Basically, drinking from the information fire hose.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly those shrinking bars visualize our collapsing collective attention span. Back in 2013, a top 50 trend on Twitter would stay in the global conversation for an average of 17.5 hours. Just 3 years later, that dropped to under 12 hours. The sheer speed and volume of modern digital information is literally forcing us into a state of chronic impatience.
Johann Hari captures the total absurdity of this situation perfectly. He says, "My desire to absorb a tsunami of information without losing my ability to focus was like my desire to eat at McDonald's every day and stay trim." I mean, it's an impossible dream, right? Scientists who study speed reading will tell you for sure, more speed equals less comprehension. Skimming fast doesn't make us smarter. It actually destroys our ability to grasp complex material.
Okay, moving to part 3, the gradual deprivation, stolen sleep. The capacity of the human brain hasn't changed in 40,000 years, yet over the last century, our average sleep duration has dropped by 20%.
And make no mistake, this is absolutely not an accident. Listen to this shockingly candid admission from Netflix CEO Reed Hastings back in 2017. We compete with sleep, and we're winning. Tech giants are actively deploying armies of engineers and AI algorithms with one explicit, deliberate goal: capturing your attention and shortening your rest. And this brilliantly illustrates the real, terrifying problem. You might think going to bed at midnight instead of 10:30 only costs you a tiny fraction of your sleep. No big deal, right? Wrong. 80% of our highly restorative REM sleep occurs in the final 20% of our rest cycle. So if you cut off that final fraction of your night, you are wiping out almost all of your REM sleep, which is exactly the phase where your brain organizes information and recovers. Plus, the damage is completely cumulative. To put this into perspective, sleep researcher Matthew Walker found that just 10 days of getting 6 hours of sleep a night results in the exact same cognitive impairment as staying awake for 24 hours straight. Just let that sink in for a second. Chronic minor sleep loss does the exact same thing to your brain as pulling an all-nighter.
So part 4, reclaiming your morning focus, the intervention.
We have to realize that we're the frogs in the boiling pot of water, and it is time to hop out. It starts the exact moment you wake up with what Hari calls a 60-minute morning abstinence. Here's the drill. Number 1, keep the phone off. Number 2, restore your daylight focus by reflecting on what matters today. Number 3, find your starlight by writing down a long-term goal. And 4, strengthen your spotlight by spending the rest of that hour doing slow, methodical work.
After that first 60 minutes, you introduce some friction with the book-first approach. Before you open a single email or check the news, just read a few paragraphs of a physical book. By replacing that manic morning scroll with linear, distraction-free reading, you're actually conditioning your mind to go deep. You're priming your brain for a flow state rather than just immediate anxiety.
But hey, this takes some real, deliberate effort because we are fighting a massive societal headwind here. Today, a tragic 50% of Americans read less than one single book a year. That's a massive systemic trend. But reversing the statistic in our own personal lives is exactly how we strike back against the Great Acceleration.
And finally, Part 5, Pre-Commitments for Better Sleep, Protecting Your Nights.
Look, you basically have to assume that at 11 p.m., technology is going to defeat your willpower. It was literally designed to do exactly that. Enter the Ulysses strategy. In Homer's Odyssey, Ulysses knew he'd be totally powerless against the siren song, so he made an unbreakable pre-commitment. He had his crew tie him to the ship's mast. We need to tie ourselves to the mast during the day so we don't just dive into the digital sea of infinite scrolling at night.
And we do this with physical pre-commitments. Lock your tablet in a drawer 2 hours before bed. Automate your downtime with an app blocker like Freedom. You can even install a cheap $10 programmable power switch on your Wi-Fi router so the power physically cuts out at bedtime. Just make the bad behavior physically impossible.
So, the crucial point is that when our internal discipline inevitably fades late at night, our external systems have to save us. That's where social pre-commitments come in. Declare an 8 p.m. device curfew to your family. Trust me, the fear of looking like a hypocrite is highly motivating. Hand your phone over to a partner, or publicly announce a 2-month app break online. Set it up so accountability holds the line for you.
Ultimately, it all comes down to a fundamental choice. The constant skimming, the highly engineered sleep deprivation, this is the water we're swimming in right now, but we don't actually have to drown in it. So I want to leave you with this drawn straight from Hari's final thoughts. Do we truly value attention and focus? Does thinking deeply actually matter to us? And most importantly, do we want it for our children? Because if we do, sheer willpower alone is absolutely never enough. We have to actively build the systems to fight for our cognitive freedom.